Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Miriam and as you might have noticed, I love books. In 2021 I challenged myself to read 365 books, and every week I post a weekly wrap-up video to show you the books I read, tell you a bit more about them, and in this way keep you updated on the challenge. Usually I film my weekly wrap-up videos on Saturday because I tell you about the books I read from Saturday until Friday. So this week's weekly wrap-up video is about the books I read from Saturday the 27th of March until Friday the 2nd of April. And usually I would film that on Saturday because then I would know exactly the amount of books I would have read. But I'm sort of cheating today because it is still Friday the 2nd of April. But I'm like 95% sure I won't finish the book I just started, or I have not even started it yet. I have put my bookmark in the first chapter, so I won't finish that book today because I already finished the book today, so I'm not finishing 2 books today. This is not a day to finish 2 books. So I decided I would film my weekly wrap-up video because tomorrow, so when you see this video this has long passed, but tomorrow I'm planning on doing a special kind of day. First I was planning on doing a readathon, but I am going to do things a bit differently. I will film it, that video will be up I think next Thursday, but I try to do it this Thursday, so then you will know everything about it. It has to do with C.S. Lewis, that's all I'm going to say about it, so if you're curious to see what it is, then stay tuned. You will find out in the near future. I read 8 books in the past 7 days, and that's great because yeah, if you try to read 365 books in a year, you have to have an average of 7 books a week. And some weeks I got more and some weeks I got less, but this week I got like 1 more than I should have, and I'm happy about that because I was just a tiny bit behind on my challenge 1 book, and now I'm back on track. The first book I finished in the past week was an audiobook. I finished that one on Saturday, so I was listening to it the entire week before it, but it was There'll Be Blue Skies by Ellie Dean, the first one in her Cliffhaven series. The series consists of 18 books, and the first one has recently been translated into Dutch, and it's not that I won't be able to read the English edition, but the audiobook of the Dutch version was up and I really like listening to that one. It was it is about the Second World War in England, but it's more about everyday life, and it was really great to learn more about that. On one hand, I'm like, I want to read the entire series, so I should read the series in English, but I do like the Dutch covers far more than the English covers, so I might collect this series in Dutch. I'm not entirely sure about that because I don't know if the publisher is going to translate every book. That's a sort of risk I should take, and it may take like, because now I think they're publishing 2 books a year, so it might take 9 years for that series to finish, and I don't know if I can wait that long if the entire series is available in English. So I will keep you updated on that. I really like this book and it was definitely one of my favorites of the year. Unfortunately, I can't say the same of the next book I finished, Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. Some years ago I got a lot of classics from a store in England called The Works. They had like all these classics for £1, and I was like, at that time I thought I would like classics. I thought you really had to read classics, so I bought a bunch. The story was just boring, and I read a review on Goodreads and that was so hilariously written. I can't remember what it was like, but it summarized the story in a sort of sarcastic way, and I really agreed with that because nothing really exciting happens in this book. I did not like the story, I thought it was boring, but I did like the concept, and To be honest, I read a summary because it was so hard for me to get through all the chapters, and when I was at like chapters 20, I decided I would read 5 chapters a day, so that would help me get through this book but also not put me in a reading slump, because classics usually do that to me. When I was like at chapter 20, I wasn't entirely sure what was happening in the book, so I decided to read a summary, and that really helped with the rest of the story. So it did not take me a really long time, but still I did not enjoy it, and I will definitely not read it again, and I don't think I will ever read another book by Jane Austen. I have tried. I've read Pride and Prejudice, I've read Emma, and I've read Sense and Sensibility, and that's it. If an author keeps doing this to you, you should not read. You don't have to read all the books, I think. The next book I read was The Story Keeper by Lisa Wingate. I read the Dutch ebook version, but it was a sequel to the prayer books. I read that in the past week, and I thought it was a sequel where you would read a bit about the other characters, but that did not happen, unfortunately. On one hand, that book really made me want to write more, but on the other hand, I had some hard times getting through it at some occasions, and yeah, I don't know. In the past week I just read a lot of books that I was not sure what I thought of them, and The Story Keeper was one of them. On one hand I'm like, that was a great story, but on the other hand I was the story did not really grip me as I thought it would, and that's a pity. The next book I read was The Last Year of the War by Susan Meissner, and that sort of did the same thing to me as The Story Keeper. On one hand, the writing style was absolutely great, and the subject of the book was also great, about the camps where German people went in the Second World War when they lived in America, and the FBI and other people thought they would be a danger to society, so they were put into camps. And the family of this girl, she is born and bred in America, but she has German parents, and they are deported to Germany in the last year of the war. And she before that they lived in a camp, and she had a friend, and I thought the story would be more about that. It would be centered around that friendship, and it definitely was, but it was different from what I expected it would be. And there were some other twists in the story, and some of them were really great, and others I was like, yeah, it sounded a bit off to me, but yeah, I liked the story, but I could not give it 5 stars. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I finished was Naturally Supernatural by Wendy, Mann. This is actually a book that one of my UK friends gave to me a year and a half ago, or almost 2 years ago, when I visited the UK in the summer of 2019, and she said I could borrow this book and read it and maybe pass it on to other friends as well. But this book is in my possession so long that I will give it back the first time I go to the UK, and I'm really looking forward to the moment where I can give this book back to that friend and thank her that she borrowed it to me. This is about how the Christian lifestyle should be. I was born in a very strict reformed environment, and therefore reading a book like this was great fun, because I also do know the other side, and I'm sort of a bit in between. I'm not very I'm not like a charismatic Christian, but I'm also not a strict reformed Christian. I'm somewhere in between, and therefore this book was I think it was a great way to open my eyes to see a bit more of the kingdom of God, and it definitely made me realize that I should, well, if I say I should pray more, it feels a bit like I have to do that, but I sometimes forget what prayer can do, and that I'm called to love people. The next book I finished was the last book I read in March, and that was Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan. I can't remember. I know his first name was Jonathan. I really don't know what to say about this book. I expected it to be something entirely different than it was. The story was, I think the subject of the story was really great. It was about grief and about 9/11 and things that happened. Bits of the story were really gripping, but also other bits of the story some bits were really dragging, and I just have a hard time deciding what I thought of this book. I ended up giving it 2 stars on Goodreads, and on one hand I'm like, yeah, that's right, but on the other hand I'm like, it was good, and the writing style was good, but only bits, and I'm just having a hard time with this book. And maybe I should read it again in the future and take it easy. But what it felt to me that this book was really hyped up, and I did not feel everything. I did not feel with the story, and I did not feel a connection with the main character. And I'm not saying that you always need to feel a connection with the main character, but if you have, but that definitely helps with liking a book. I'm just not sure what to think of this book, and so I'll just continue to the next book because I really enjoyed that book. This is a Dutch original book. It's Onder Zijn vleugels, written by Marianne Grandia. I was not entirely sure whether I was going to read this book. I told you in my TBR video of April, but I decided to read it, and I actually read it on the day I had to go to the hospital. And because I've told you this before, I'm really tired, and they are running some tests, and it's probably post-COVID, but just to be sure, they're running tests and stuff like that. But the main character in this book also has to go to a hospital because she has, I really don't know how to pronounce this disease, but MS. Throughout the book she learns to trust God and have faith that He is a healer, and not just of physical diseases like things you can see, but also a healer of the heart, because she needs spiritual healing more than she needs physical healing. In the end, she does not get healed from her disease, but she receives spiritual healing, which is, I think, far more important. And I read this book 3 years ago, also during a time I had to go to the hospital and had some tests done because of my celiac disease, and that really helped me on my journey to the hospital. I also reread that book because of its sequel, Koorden van Liefde, also written by Marianne Grandia. I have not looked it up yet, but when you see this video I have the translation of the book, because it's from a biblical term, so I can look up the translation, but I had not thought of that yet. It might be what I think it is, but it might not be, so look in the description where you will find the translation of this title. One of the main characters in this book is a character that I read about in previous books. He was described. He did not play a part in that book, and yeah, I just finished this book and I have a really hard time describing what it was about, but it was about healing and family and forgiveness, and the parable of the prodigal was a part of this book. I thought it fitted really well with the storyline, because the parable of the prodigal is probably the most known parable, and usually if you encounter it in books it can be a bit, it feel a bit forced on, but that was not the case in this book. And it wasn't about a prodigal son, but it was about a prodigal daughter, so that made it a bit different as well. I think this book was my favourite book of the week. next to There'll Be Blue Skies by Ellie Dean, because that was also a great book, but this was an entire different story. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more bookish content made by me, then consider subscribing to my channel, and as always, happy reading!